Who should be the next deputy of ThunderClan? Yes, before I start, while I was in the middle of researching and writing the script, Akira put out this same exact video. So, if you want to see a video that gets to almost the exact same point in a fraction of the time, go watch hers instead. Spoilers here, I cannot help it, so look away if you don't want to know. Even though you've seen the title and it's too late, it looks like, very possibly, Squirrelflight could be stepping up as leader of ThunderClan. This is a pretty good idea at this point, as not only has she been making all of the meaningful decisions in ThunderClan for the last 2 arcs, in the most recent one, Bramblestar is just a mess. To give a brief and relatively unnuanced summary here, he spends the first book confused and distant, not knowing how to interact with his clanmates. In the second book, he's acting similar, but still manages to create a setup situation to get into a fight with Squirrelflight for going behind his back in the operation of the clan. And then in the third, he's barely even there until a bit of lucidity is squeezed out of him at the end. It's implied that he's not really doing his job at all by this point, and he and Squirrelflight have a long talk and come to a mutual decision that she should take over. And that's great and all, but I'm on the fence that they're actually going to give this to us. Yeah, I'm the guy everyone's warning you about who thinks Squilf is gonna die. I just have no trust left in me after Squirrelflight's hope. The book ended before they left for the Moonpool, and either killing Squirrelflight or making it so Bramblestar cannot retire by StarClan's choice are both completely believable outcomes. The latter because StarClan is a super unreasonable entity, and forcing old, traumatized, and mentally ill people to continue to be leader until they die seems to just be their thing up until this point, especially with characters like Blue Star and Black Star. That said, like I said in the podcast that we reviewed the most recent book in, if you want to see that, go to my channel's community tab. I linked it there. It is entirely possible that they held off on having them go to the Moonpool until the next book so that they can have Squirrelflight's leader ceremony as the prologue to the next book, which would be fantastic. To see that would be great. I just don't have any trust in my heart. But this is all a topic for another day. But let's say that Squirrelflight is becoming Squirrelstar by some absolute miracle. Let's say that it actually happens. Who should she choose as her deputy? Who will she choose as her deputy? I think it'll be fun to go through our options. For the purpose of this exercise, I'm assuming something about Squirrelflight, that being that she would actually follow the warrior code when choosing her deputy, and in doing so is going to choose a cat who has actually had an apprentice, and that she probably won't be choosing a medicine cat or elder. Additionally, for fun, I'm going to play pretend that the warrior cat's team has access to and remembers what they actually wrote in the past about these individual characters, going back the last 3 arcs, not to Oots specifically, because realistically this choice probably isn't being made with the past in mind at all, but we're going to pretend it is. So here's a list of cats who can't compete here as they're disqualified. First off, older and slightly more well-known cats: Cloudtail, Brackenfur, Thornclaw, Brightheart, Jayfeather, Alderheart, Daisy, Stormcloud, and Birchfall. Most of these are elders, some of them are medicine cats, none of them can compete. And then, new team generation warriors: Fernsong, Sorrelstripe, Spotfur, Honeyfur, Plumstone, Shellfur, Thriftier, and Flipclaw also can't compete. None of them have had apprentices. And then, the young people, and the ThunderClan newcomers. So, Bayshine, Myrtlebloom, Finchlight, Nightheart, Fernstripe, and Sunbeam, none of them. They've not had apprentices either, and some of them are basically just out of the apprentice den themselves. Oh, and obviously Stemkit, Bristlekit, and Greykit cannot compete either, because, they're 5. I'm sure this seems like it slims down our options considerably, but ThunderClan is big, and has a lot of nobodies who are qualified for the job in this sense, largely because almost all of the guys I just mentioned had to have mentors. Additionally, for fun, we are going to sort these into 4 categories, the first being not happening, which will include cats that are almost definitely not going to be chosen. The second is unlikely, where I'll put cats that probably won't be chosen, but they're at least more likely than the first set. And then the third is fun, which is where I'm going to put cats that I kind of want to be deputy, but they're probably on the same level as the unlikely category, but have more going for them. And the fourth and smallest category is actual candidates, where I will put what's actually going on here. I'll also be grading them on what kind of deputy I think they will be, based on what we know of their character. For lack of a better phrase, I'm going to call this deputy quality, a hypothetical assumption of their performance in their role based on what we've seen about them prominently or recently. So hello and welcome to Not Happening, the show where we go over cats who are almost certainly not becoming deputy. These are exclusively younger cats, most of whom have spent their lives in the background. That said, there's a couple exceptions, including our first guy. Finleap. He's a former SkyClan warrior who moved to ThunderClan in A Vision of Shadows to be with Twigbranch. He was prominently featured on screen in A Vision of Shadows, early on as just a sweet boy, and later as kind of a jerk. He's had an apprentice, but he's not really a notable or respectable ThunderClan cat. He's just a guy. It's also worth mentioning that his apprentice, alongside Twigbranch's, ran away to become a kitty pet. He's probably the least likely qualified candidate in the whole clan, between him being a bit unreasonable and not having initially been a ThunderClan warrior. There are no rules that say you need to be from ThunderClan initially to become deputy, but he's really not impressive in any category on top of that. Additionally, deputy quality probably low, probably bad. He doesn't seem particularly good at managing conflict or his own insecurities. Eagle Wing is a Thornclaw and Blossomfall kit. She recently mentored Myrtlepaw and is shown to be a bit more immediately accepting of Nightheart's return than a fellow ginger cat, Cherryfall. That said, she's probably the least impressive and interesting of Thornclaw and Blossomfall's remaining 3 kits. The other 2 never had apprentices, but they're far more memorable as characters. Her deputy quality? Unknowable. But she's shown to have good judgment at least once in the most recent book, so I suppose she would be fair? Possibly. She would be reasonable? Possibly. Dew Nose is the last remaining kit from Brightheart and Cloudtail's late litter in Bramblestar's Storm, and father to Myrtlebloom and Bayshine. In my eyes, the redeeming quality for Dew Nose is largely having a cute name. It's basically the only redeemable use of nose, besides maybe Petal Nose. But the guy hasn't even shown up on screen for the last 3 books, and it's safe to say he's strictly living in the... livening. He's livening? You know what? It's funny. I'm leaving it in there. Dew Nose is strictly living in the not happening category. His deputy quality is also probably unknowable. For a cat like this, we just have very little to go on. He's there. Holly Tuft is one of many Cinderheart and Lionblaze kits, both identical to and named after her dead and complicated aunt, Hollyleaf. Seems like a lot more pressure than being named after a genetically well-loved dead guy that you don't look like, but what do I know? That said, she barely says a thing, barely does a thing, and quietly mentored Flipclaw, a problem, largely off-screen. She doesn't show up much, doesn't do much, and much like everyone in this category is just there. When she does show up, it's usually to say something a bit nasty. She calls her own siblings traitors for becoming kitty pets. Unfortunately, while headcanons could do wonders for this character, what she actually has on screen is a little disappointing. Deputy quality, from what we know of her, she'd probably be strict and harsh to outsiders, as usually when she's needed in a scene, it's to say something xenophobic. I'm not really sure about her ability to organize patrols, but I'd imagine that if Squirrelflight picked somebody, they would eventually get used to that element of the job. The last cat in my not happening category is Leafshade. Her most prominent role is that of Spotfur's mentor in the novella Spotfur's Rebellion, where she's mentored a Spotpaw. Spotpaw is very impatient with her mentor, and she seems to take a long time to make decisions, the mentor, not Spotpaw. In general, they don't have a super strong relationship, and Leafshade is very strict with her overall. Relevant, though, is that when Spotfur learns that Bramblestar was mentored by Firestar, she thinks, Spotpaw tried to imagine Leafshade someday becoming leader, being able to say she'd been her apprentice. She couldn't. Leafshade was a good warrior and a good mentor, but Spotpaw didn't think she even wanted to be leader. And I think this is probably a good point. Aside from the fact that this cat is Leafshade we're talking about, if a cat isn't interested in a leadership position, they probably wouldn't want to be deputy. That said, some deputy choices in the past have been surprises. I doubt that Squirrelflight's going to surprise pick Leaf Shade, but sure, deputy quality, probably passable. If Spotfur's rebellion is anything to go off of, she would be a responsible deputy. Moving on, our next category is unlikely. Both of the next two categories are probably all cats about equal in chances to become deputy, but they're separated by just the fact that something sparks in my brain a bit when considering the latter five rather than the former. Not to say this coming category doesn't include cats that are perfectly qualified and might even be some of the best choices for deputy. I'm just not particularly interested in them. So first up, we have Bumblestripe. I believe him to be the least likely of this category and very nearly put him in the last one, but having had multiple apprentices and being a generally more prominent character pushed him up over the others. That said, this probably isn't happening either. He trained the unfortunate Seedpaw in Bramblestar's Storm, and then later both Leafshade and Shelfer. Most fans recognize him as being the quote-unquote nice guy who turns on Dovewing easily during the last few books of Omen of the Stars, but lately, as written by the new team, he's just generally a bit conservative, aggressive, and grumpy, but on top of that, he's oddly still into Dovewing, even though she's left ThunderClan and had 2 litters elsewhere. He competes with Berrynose for a bit in the Broken Code arc for the favor of the imposter, but ultimately loses to him despite the latter not having trained an apprentice. But regardless of this, his blind loyalty to the imposter caused him to repeatedly be used against Bristlefrost and Squirrelflight during the Broken Code arc. It's incredibly doubtful that, after this experience in particular, Squirrelflight would choose him, regardless of qualification. But even without that, he's unquestionably got a bit of a nasty streak that wouldn't be a good trait in a deputy anyways. After the imposter is removed from power, he's one of the biggest supporters of killing Bramblestar's body to rid him of the imposter, ignoring the fact that this wouldn't solve the conflict because the imposter could simply impose himself on a different dead leader's corpse again after losing a life. This was directly in opposition of what Squirrelflight wanted, which she probably isn't about to forget. On top of this, in the novella Spotfur's Rebellion, he's used as a minor antagonist who punishes the title character harshly for her generally immature behavior. The new team thinks less well of him than Vicky seemed to, and Vicky's the one who wrote him yelling at girls for not wanting to date him. Deputy quality, likely aggressive, based on his behavior in recent books and Spotfur's Rebellion. It's hard to imagine most of the cats in the clan even reacting well to Bumblestripe deputy. Although, something that we might get if he is made deputy by some sort of meteor hitting Earth situation is the fact that his nephew and apprentice Shelfer, who seems to take after him a bit in personality, is in a half-clan relationship. Stripe of WindClan became a ThunderClan warrior to be with Shelfer, and it would be interesting to see what Bumblestripe thinks of that, especially when Dovewing didn't get with him and instead went to ShadowClan. Anyways, on to our second cat. Whitewing is the oldest option. In fact, she's the oldest senior warrior in ThunderClan, with Daisy being a queen, Bramblestar being leader, and everyone else who's older than her being in the Elder's Den. She was nearly old enough to become an apprentice when Squirrelflight was born, making her about 6 months older than her. She also mentored 3 different cats, making her more qualified in the only qualification we actually have. I can see her being an option if the team wanted Squirrelflight to be looking for some sort of older White Storm mirroring figure to be her deputy, but logically this is awful. Squirrelflight herself is about as old as her, and on top of that, Whitewing, despite being an older character, stayed an apprentice for like 2 years and didn't become a warrior until Birchfall did because she was waiting for him. And Squirrelflight doesn't need the experience of an older warrior like her father did when he assumed his position abnormally young. I don't think Whitewing necessarily is at the age where she needs to retire, especially not when her Uncle Thornclaw just retired, no time has passed, and has a couple years on her still, but I have a bad feeling about her dying pretty soon if she were made deputy, honestly because killing both Brightheart and Cloudtail probably isn't happening anytime soon, and I've been anticipating them possibly killing Whitewing so she doesn't go to the Elder's Den with her parents. I hope not, though. Additionally, with it mirroring the choice of White Storm, it would be a likely end for her to die early. She's briefly shown to be reasonable in brief scenes during the Broken Code arc, including defending Shadowsight to Lionblaze, but she just doesn't show up much. On the subject of deputy quality, fine. probably good. I can't think of a reason White Wing wouldn't be balanced and reasonable. Mouse Whisker is the second oldest option, and as far as apprentices go, he's just as accomplished as White Wing, having mentored Bumblestripe, Plumstone, and most recently Bayshine. He's the only living kit of Daisy's, although she does have 2 grandchildren through Berrynose, and he came to the clan as a kit born outside of it. He hasn't had much focus or attention on himself ever, though, despite a brief half-clan flirtation with Minnowtail in early Power of 3, and frequently lingering in the background with his littermate Hazeltail in Omen of the Stars. Most recently, he was prominent in Daisy's kin, but mostly to be, generically responsible and awkward around his birth father. He's a quote-unquote safe choice, and also vaguely interesting in that he's not clan-born, but other than that, he doesn't really have anything strong supporting him. He flip-flops between defending Squirrelflight and wanting to kill Bramblestar during the Broken Code, and it's hard to say if Squirrelflight would be realistically able to fully trust him. Deputy quality? I'm sure fine as well. He's a good boy, unless he's been dating Minnowtail, but if he were actually dating Minnowtail, he would be in the interesting category. Next we have Cherryfall. She's a Poppy Frost and Berrynose kit, one of the mentioned Daisy grandchildren that's still alive, and she mentored Sparkpelt in A Vision of Shadows. Also in A Vision of Shadows, she was characterized as more upbeat, empathetic, and excitable as a character in contrast with her brother Mole Whisker. That said, after she stops being showcased as a mentor, she's shown to be on the conservative side of the SkyClan conflict. She's distrustful of the new clan and worries about ThunderClan's ability to take care of itself with another clan at the lake, and to be hostile towards Dovewing for changing clans. And while she never really shakes this secondary characterization in more recent books, she is a cat to support Squirrelflight while she acts as temporary leader, which is more than we can say about a lot of the more xenophobic members of the post-imposter ThunderClan. She hangs around the decidedly more xenophobic Bumblestripe and Blossomfall, and her most recent appearance is that of her judging and distrusting Nightheart as he returns to ThunderClan. I don't think Squirrelflight is about to pick her, but she would be a choice that enforces general clan loyalty and archaic levels of warrior code upholding, which hypothetically could be good for image without choosing a cat that's directly opposed to her. Deputy quality? Strict. Probably rule-oriented, harsh to outsiders, and not as bad as some of the other options in the strict conservative area. Lastly, in this category, we've got Lilyheart. She's only mentored Nightheart, but the fact that she's a main character's mentor gives her a bit of a boost. While she is in the less interesting category, I do think she's bordering on the interesting category. She's the Aaron's go-to sweet lady and adoptive mother lately, but she's also one to stand for what she believes in during the Broken Code, where she believes that they need to take care of each other and follow the code until StarClan returns. She's also another who was on Squirrelflight's side on the kill Bramblestar or don't kill Bramblestar debate, which, again, regardless of if or not you're aligned with her on the issue, would be a benefit in Squirrelflight's eyes. Lilyheart also respects Squirrelflight's opinion while grading Nightheart's second assessment, but she falls into the background after she's no longer Nightheart's mentor. Her reliance on Squirrelflight's judgment is trusting, but could also be read as her being a bit inexperienced with mentorship. I do think Lilyheart, Poppyfrost, or Cinderheart being made deputy would be vaguely interesting for the fact that their father, Brackenfur, was a candidate for deputy back when Brambleclaw was chosen. It would also be nice to see a cat who's more associated with what the Aaron Hunter team tends to make feminine traits as a character in a position of power, as opposed to a reoccurring queen or friendly background character. Have we ever had a sweet, docile, kindly deputy? I can't think of any. That alone would be something interesting to see. Deputy quality, this is another I'm sure she'd be fine. I think she would be a good foil to Squirrelflight somewhat too, as she would be more gentle and optimistic. Squirrelflight is rude and rash and does what she thinks is right as soon as she thinks it's right. So on to the next category, cats who, while they probably have the same vague level of chance as the last few have spoken about, I'm more interested in by default. First of all, Poppyfrost. As you know, I love Poppyfrost. She is one of my favorite cats. Of course, I want Poppy Frost to be deputy. This is who I would be putting in if I were in charge, just because I like her, specifically who she is in Power of Three and Omen of the Stars. She's had one apprentice, just her little sister Lilyheart. That said, Poppy Frost is a super infrequent character under the new team. She's only spoken twice this last arc, and in both situations it's been negative, anti-change comments. First insisting that the warrior code shouldn't be changed, and then later bringing up Rowan Star when Bramblestar is stepping down. It's clear the new team's idea of her isn't the same as the cat presented to us in Power of Three and Omen of the Stars, so while I would like her to be deputy, it might be best that this definitely isn't happening. If Poppy Frost just, continues to linger in the background, I don't have to worry too much about her behavior change recently. It's not that she was ever meek. She was always willing to fight, and she was always married to Berrynose. Well, not always, but she was eventually married to Berrynose, but it seems like she's kind of become a stock warrior code defending type in recent years when she wasn't really that way before. That said, despite the fact that her husband, Berrynose, was extremely big in his support of the imposter, the only time Poppy Frost ever expresses anything significant under the imposter's reign is to let out a wail when Berrynose is later exiled. After Squirrelflight takes back over, her behavior is cautious and she's seen in most of the group conflicts in Darkness Within, without actually saying much of anything. She witnesses the conflict where her former mentor Thornclaw leaves, but doesn't say much of anything except a nervous, "Surely, without StarClan to guide us, we'd be rogues." To which Squirrelflight says, basically, no, we have the warrior code still. Later we see her quietly helping the clan rebuild and doing chores for Jayfeather. So under the new team, similarly but not to the same extremes as her daughter Cherryfall, Squirrelflight choosing Poppy Frost would be aligned more towards picking someone safe who can cover ground in the clan politically that she doesn't cover. But it's hard to say who they even think she is. Deputy quality? It really just depends how they would write her, but as it stands, likely a more reserved but still supportive deputy. She's a background cat of background cats to the new team. Now, Cinderheart is Lilyheart and Poppy Frost's sister, Lionblaze's mate, and mother or grandmother of quite a large chunk of ThunderClan now. She's had 2 apprentices, Ivypool and Finchlight, but unlike Poppy Frost, who shows up to say something every so often in the last couple arcs, Cinderheart might as well be on the side of a milk carton. She's interesting conceptually from what we have of her in Omen of the Stars and Power of Three, but after the new team takes over, we only really see her reacting to events involving Lionblaze or her children. She's one of quite a few cats who leave with Sparkpelt when the imposter exiles her, which you'd imagine would lead to us seeing more of her, but we don't. Her only relevant scene in the last 2 arcs is her defending her kits Flywhisker and Snaptooth, who left to become kitty pets. Later on, she implies it might have been for the best that Squirrelflight left with Ashfur, and her mate, Lionblaze, sort of yells at her for this in public. And then the only thing she says at all in the most recent arc is praising Nightheart for catching prey after he comes back to ThunderClan, and while it's not unheard of for this team to suddenly focus on a character who hasn't been at all relevant leading up, look at how quickly Icewing went from no lines to incredibly important character, but I think it does imply that she's really just not on their minds at all. Part of me is interested in Cinderheart as deputy for the social aspect of it. She could be Lionblaze's more important wife. I think Lionblaze's wife deserves to be more important than he is, actually. A lot of why I'm interested in this is just because, again, her character in Omen of the Stars and Power of Three, not really anything she's done recently. Much like Poppy Frost, it's just a lingering, this would be nice. Deputy quality? I think she would be a good deputy, genuinely. I think the new team knows enough about who Cinderheart is to not suddenly portray her as irresponsible or something. Now to keep talking about Poppy Frost's direct family members. The third cat in this category is Mole Whisker, not Mouse Whisker, who is an entirely different guy but also his uncle on his father's side. My interest in the idea of Mole Whisker as deputy is largely based on his characterization in the book The Apprentice's Quest, where he is Alderheart's initial mentor. While his sister Cherryfall was energetic and seemed fun, Mole Whisker was serious, stoic, and quiet. He was rule-oriented, no-nonsense, and Vulcan-like. Not to say he's emotionless, as he does get annoyed with Alderpaw and eventually angry with Needlepaw, but even then he's holding himself back, keeping his behavior in check. He's concerned with rules and doing things properly, but seemingly not entirely for the sake of the Warrior Code or StarClan, as he mentions them infrequently compared to others, such as his mother, but seemingly for the sake of his own standards. After returning with Alderpaw, he immediately trains Honeypaw into Honeyfur. He showcases responsible, careful behavior and is shown in later A Vision of Shadows to easily gain the trust of SkyClan's cats. In the Broken Code, he's a cat to question Ashfur's choice in deputy, remembering the apprentice rule, although he seems to not do that in the earlier case of his father, Berrynose. Although it's believable, the authors didn't even remember that Berrynose had no apprentice. That said, he's never seen on either side of the conflict when Squirrelflight is trying to lead ThunderClan in the latter half. In the most recent arc, he's shown questioning the logic of RiverClan warriors searching for Reed Whisker on the wrong side of the lake, and he questions Squirrelflight's judgment of going against Bramblestar's orders when WindClan is caught stealing prey. Late in the most recent book, Nightheart thinks to himself that he'd like to claw Mole Whisker's ears off when the latter suggests he might be betraying ShadowClan to seek out Bramblestar. He also later worries that Mole Whisker is going to make a sarcastic comment towards him, which doesn't happen, although the next time he shows up, Mole Whisker does tell him normally aggressively that he stinks of ShadowClan. He also reacts to Bramblestar's decision to step down, saying, "StarClan gave you 9 lives, Bramblestar," he yowled. "How could you be so bold to tell them they were wrong?" I am both interested and not interested in Deputy Mole Whisker. On one hand, I'm not interested because the ratio of female to male characters in power in this series is ridiculously unbalanced, especially within ThunderClan, and always has been. Making him deputy wouldn't be doing this any favors. But I am interested as I see him as a bit of an anti-Squirrelflight. Squirrelflight embodied challenging her leader as deputy, and I'd imagine that if we have any stock in character consistency, she would find the input of someone very, very unlike her, such as Mole Whisker, to be a valuable choice. She acts on what she believes is right, rashly, and quickly, but hypothetically, Mole Whisker would be the opposite, wanting to make calculated, controlled decisions. Squirrelflight following her heart, while Mole Whisker is following the rules. Deputy quality, I see him as someone who would do the formal tasks of deputy, like organizing patrols well, but on top of this would be someone who would counter Squirrelflight's rash decisions. My next cat in this category is Blossomfall. The reason she's here is because Blossomfall is a problem. She's been mean, she bullies Ivypool as an apprentice, she has a bunch of extremely unresolved problems with her sister and mother and Omen of the Stars that push her to train in the Dark Forest. She has a casual conversation where she calls Dovewing not right for her brother because she's a little different. We see Blossomfall in Squirrelflight's Hope, insisting that Sunrise should bleed out because it's not their problem, and later insisting that the dying cat is a trap. That said, much like most of these characters, recently she's done a whole lot of nothing. She has a negative response to Leafstar visiting camp, and that's it for Blossomfall in a Starless clan. Even in the last arc, she's given no space to react or even respond to her husband saying, "If I decide to leave, I'll come back to say goodbye." The guy doesn't even ask her to come with him or anything. He's like, "If I decide to ditch you forever, I'll let you know," and we don't see her say anything after that, not even when the scene gets repeated in Graystripe's vow. Graystripe's vow, by the way, where Graystripe, despite being her father, thinks of her extremely scarcely. She shows up mostly in a dream, Bumblestripe and Briarlight even less so, mostly also in said dream. Stormfur and Feathertail, however, constantly on his mind. But that's irrelevant. Blossomfall mentored Hollytuft. Bramblestar's Storm tells us that Cloudtail was Hollytuft's mentor, but the apprentice's quest is newer and more relevant to the current team, so I'm disregarding it as a complete retcon. Anyways, even though Blossomfall is a ball of bad attitude and unresolved issues, she's a loyal ThunderClan cat. She exiles herself alongside Sparkpelt when she's kicked out of ThunderClan. She believes in the warrior code, and during Dovewing's silence, she makes sure her sister has a thorn-free nest, although, bothering me personally, is not seen speaking directly to her until A Vision of Shadows, and shows Dovewing that she wants to help her clan and put the Dark Forest behind her. Squirrelflight probably doesn't have much of a reason to pick her at all, aside her being one of the cats to leave when the imposter exiled Sparkpelt, but imagine what a disaster of a combination it would be, picking this prickly, grudge-holding, xenophobic cat as her deputy. Imagine all the problems that could cause. It's like Ivypool, but like 10 times worse. Blossomfall is making up conspiracy theories about the sisters during Squirrelflight's Hope. Imagine how much drama she would create just by continuing that behavior. Deputy quality for Blossomfall? Probably poor. I think she'd be especially awful with Squirrelflight, and I can see them both being rash and angry during conflict, but with Blossomfall being more of an I hate outsiders type than a follow your heart type, and it could get even worse. I can't imagine she would be good at it, but I would have fun, and that's what matters. Lastly, in this category, we have Twigbranch. Twigbranch has struggled a lot between switching clans twice as an apprentice, having to deal with Finleap's dad, having to deal with Finleap, and having an especially hard time training as an apprentice, though she's basically been one for an entire year. Most recently, she's forced to atone by the imposter, banished, and just generally abused especially badly during Ashfur's reign. Even after the imposter is captured, the apprentice she trains leaves to become a kitty pet. Twigbranch's life in ThunderClan has been actual misery and trauma. If I didn't know better, I would think Vicky wrote her. In the first book of A Starless Clan, she has what seems to be a PTSD response to Bramblestar berating her small hunting hall. While I don't think Squirrelflight has particular reason to pick her over other cats, and she seems, very timid and underqualified for the job, she should be considered just for the fact that she's a major character that the new team would have a stronger idea of on their minds than some of the others. I consider her the most likely of the cats in this category despite the fact that she's so inexperienced and traumatized. The reason I'm particularly interested in Twigbranch being the deputy is really just because I think it would be fulfilling. It would be nice to see her conclude in a position where she is of some level of importance and knows that she is part of ThunderClan no matter what. Deputy quality, I'm sure she'd warm up to it eventually, but it's hard to say she would be any good at it at first. In fact, she might be kind of bad at being deputy, but watching her struggle and slowly get better would be nice. And now, for my last category, the cats I think are most likely to become the deputy of ThunderClan. I am going in no particular order here, but there's only 3 left, so I'm going to tell you. These cats are Lionblaze, Ivypool, and Sparkpelt. There is a vague reason why these cats might not be chosen, however, and it's the fact that this arc is so closely scrutinizing the nepotism in ThunderClan, alongside a few mentions in the last arc. And all 3 of these options are of varying levels of related to Firestar. Ivypool being the least related, and Lionblaze and Sparkpelt both being his grandchildren. You could say this is a point in favor to Ivypool, however, because cats were really only focused on this detail during the Omen of Stars arc. But it's entirely possible, as well, that Squirrelflight could pick a much less likely cat, have them die, and then turn to one of these in the end. Additionally, the cats in the clan don't really seem to consider Lionblaze to be Squirrelflight's son anymore, even though she raised him. So if we're talking about nepotism, Sparkpelt, then Lionblaze, then Ivypool. Lionblaze is, well, I'm not sure I need to describe him. He is Lionblaze, but I will anyways. Lionblaze is a prophesized, intensely important child in the Power of 3 and Omen of the Stars. I describe his power as undefeatable as long as he's trying his very best to fight. Within the confines of his power, he does stuff like accidentally kill someone and lust for more battle training. But he loses that power at the end of Omen of the Stars. Largely, in the first arc where the new team has their hands on him, A Vision of Shadows, Lionblaze is a piece to be put on battle patrols and a generically responsible senior warrior. You could describe him as exceptionally boring. But in the Broken Code, Squirrelflight makes him her temporary deputy, or her semi-deputy, because Squirrelflight technically isn't the leader or isn't really considered the leader by most of the clan. She makes him her quote-unquote deputy. Now, logically, he was one of only a few choices she really had, with a chunk of the clan's senior warriors having been loyal to and fighting for the imposter before that point. She was put in a corner, and in the corner was Lionblaze. Before this, though, they start to set him up as a bit ill-tempered when he wasn't before. He's grumpy and negative, mostly showing through in a silent thaw. He gets banished from clan territory by the imposter, and when he comes back, he's made to atone for his own birth. Then, later, he's banished again for being half-clan. Early in Veil of Shadows, he proposes killing Bramblestar's body, and they manage to walk him back to capture Bramblestar's body. For now. Later, during the battle with the imposter, he kills Hairstar while Bristlefrost screams at him to stop. Oopsie! Soon after, Squirrelflight resumes leadership duties and chooses him as her deputy. She doesn't explain this decision at all, aside from telling Briss that she's not right for it. Squirrelflight isn't being respected by her clanmates so that the authors can make the clan seem super weak and divided without Bramblestar around. Thornclaw doesn't respect Lionblaze's deputy, and they fight about it in public, where Thornclaw accuses Squirrelflight of nepotism. Some cats seem to agree with him. Later, Lionblaze enters the imposter's prison to yell at him and beat him up and maybe kill him. Shadowsight tries to stop him with reason and succeeds, but Lionblaze threatens that he can't defend Ashfur forever before backing off. He gets talked down from his intentions to murder the imposter more by Tigerstar before apologizing. These actions are directly in conflict with what Squirrelflight, his leader, and the woman who raised him wanted, for Bramblestar's body to be preserved until they can get him back. He tries later to convince Squirrelflight to talk with Ashfur, which doesn't go anywhere, so he turns back to killing Bramblestar's body. After she insists that that's not the right move, he lists off the mistakes she's made and stomps off. Later, frustrated still with not being able to kill Bramblestar's body, he states she isn't the real leader. Eventually, Squirrelflight gives in and tells him that she won't be the one to propose it. It's brought before the leaders and they all vote together to kill Bramblestar's body. Shadowsight allows the body to escape and Squirrelflight goes missing at the same time. For some reason, everybody seems to have no problem continuing to treat Lionblaze as deputy despite this. He organizes a patrol to go harass Shadowsight. Jayfeather comes along, saying, "I know what you're like, Lionblaze." Jayfeather stepped forward to confront his brother. "No cat better. You tend to think with your claws and then regret it later. I want to make sure that Shadowsight and Squirrelflight get treated fairly." Tigerstar tries to get Shadowsight to slip out with his mother, Sparkpelt, to save him, but they're caught immediately by Lionblaze's patrol. Lionblaze gets into a physical fight with Tigerstar and loses. He makes it clear that he cares about Squirrelflight's well-being now that he has wildly disobeyed her orders and she's missing. Despite the fact Tigerstar threatened to kill him if he went after Shadowsight, he later insists to his clanmates that Shadowsight needs to be punished and implies that he should have killed Shadowsight when he had a chance. After this, he's confronted by Spotfur, who tells him, "Outbursts like that show why you're not ThunderClan's true leader, Lionblaze." And then ThunderClan fights about who their leader should be for several hours. I'm not exaggerating here. It says, "The clamor continued while Sunhigh passed and the sun began to slide down the sky." Eventually, ThunderClan comes to the conclusion that their leader should be Graystripe. I don't want to talk about this. It's irrelevant and too silly and weird. Either way, the point is, Lionblaze agrees that the old man should be in charge, not him, and steps aside. In the new arc, Lionblaze is around, but not incredibly prominent. He growls at people. He seems to respect Squirrelflight. He calls Nightheart youngster, like an old southern grandpa or any given Muppet in the form of an old man. In Book 2, he sends Nightheart home early from a patrol after the young warrior gets hurt. Nightheart thinks about how he doesn't like the idea of Lionblaze or Birchfall leading the clan. Good news, kid. Birchfall isn't qualified. Or interesting. He's disapproving when Nightheart returns, saying, "Of course you realized you were meant to be in ThunderClan once that was your only option." Last of all, when Squirrelflight and Bramblestar announce their intention for Bramblestar to step down, he says, "This isn't how things are done," he insisted. "Leaders are meant to lead until the end of their 9 lives. Abruptly changing leaders like this, without waiting for the change to happen naturally, will weaken ThunderClan. Don't think the other clans won't take advantage of us." Which, in my opinion, is nonsense, but that's not what we're talking about here. The point is he disapproves. So, would Squirrelflight pick Lionblaze as deputy? I mean, she did in the last arc, and if the writers remember the last arc in any capacity, no. Then why is he here in the top 3? It's because he's expected to be. The writers expect us to expect him to be. The readers expect us to expect him to be. The cats in the book probably do too. But does it make reasonable sense for him to actually become deputy? No, not at all. He relinquished the position to Graystripe after proving repeatedly he was too rash and too violent to lead. There's no way anyone would reasonably choose him after the narrative literally carries the intention that he was a terrible choice. And why would Squirrelflight do the same thing twice from a writing perspective? The twist here is that Lionblaze shouldn't even be in the running. Anyways, deputy quality? Probably okay at organizing patrols and terrible at being anywhere near a position of power or conflict. Even though Lionblaze has been in the books for a long time, he's one of the most wildly unpopular cats, not even in a people hate him sort of way, but in a nobody cares about him at all sort of way. They made a Warrior Cats poll for what plush you want made in 2022, and he was at the very bottom of 10 to 15 cats. The very, very, very bottom, under cats you would assume are less popular, like Ashfur, Dovewing, Mapleshade, and Bristlefrost. Wait, did I say Mapleshade? No. Mapleshade is one of the most popular cats ever. Of course he's under Mapleshade. And if they know this, their team probably isn't looking at Lionblaze like he's an appealing choice. But on top of that, I can't help but reiterate that it would be comically dense for them to reappoint a cat who tried to kill a doctor for being manipulated and then stepped down willingly after proven incompetent at leading. If Squirrelflight made Lionblaze her deputy again after writing that stuff 2 years ago, I would assume the entire Warrior Cats team has been replaced by aliens. So he's disqualified. It's just, he's gone. Goodbye. He's still in this category, but he's only in this category because he was a grandfathered in. So next up, Ivypool. Ivypool was relevant mostly in Omen of the Stars, where she joined the Dark Forest, served as a spy, was outclassed in her own purpose by her sister Dovewing, and again, though, I do want to focus on the new team's books about the character, as they're the ones we will or won't be looking at when we're thinking about making her deputy. So while she's very prominent in Omen of the Stars, it's not really what's relevant here. Ivypool is very prominent in A Vision of Shadows, where she's the original mentor to Twigpaw, but she had also previously fully mentored Snowbush. She's a supportive figure to Twigpaw, but eventually feels they should give up searching for her mother. She gains a mate called Fernsong and hesitates to have kittens, but is eventually coaxed into it. Supposedly, she leaves the nursery early, and her duties as a queen are taken by him after the kits are weaned, but we never see this happen on screen. Either way, it's unlikely we'll ever see her have another litter. The kittens she does have are literally the most genetically incompatible creatures in ThunderClan. They're related to everyone, do not have more. Good thing nobody alive would ever be romantically interested in Flipclaw. Ivypool protects Twigpaw throughout her early apprenticeship and is generally seen as kind of a cool, responsible figure, unlike Violet Shine's Needleclaw, who is a cool, irresponsible figure. I'm so happy to be Ivypool's apprentice, she thought. She always has my back. That said, Ivypool has a lot of unresolved feelings throughout the bits written by the new team. She's shown to be continually hostile to Tigerheart, even before she has any remaining reason to be when Dovewing takes off. She gets angry to see them together, and seems to lose her composure more and more the longer ShadowClan cats stay in ThunderClan, and Ivypool eventually stops being a safe space for Twigpaw during Shattered Sky. She apologizes when Twigpaw returns after finding SkyClan, and they make up briefly, before Twigpaw leaves again to try and live in SkyClan. Ivypool's relationship with Twigpaw at this point is a bit passive-aggressive, and she shows a lot of suspicion and sensitivity about the idea of a cat switching clans, especially in relation to her sister Dovewing. This gets worse when Dovewing goes missing, and later Tigerheart with her. When Twigpaw comes back to ThunderClan for a second time, she is assigned to Sparkpelt as opposed to Ivypool. She definitely prefers Ivypool. More on her later. Ivypool gives birth by surprise in Late River of Fire, and the power of babies makes her go, "But now, seeing my own kits, I think I'm learning what's really important. I think she had to be with Tigerheart, and if that's true, I think I can accept it now that she's been gone so long." Dovewing comes back soon after, her older kittens happily meeting Ivypool's. That said, as Dovewing announces that she's going back to ShadowClan, Ivypool responds negatively, avoiding looking at her, shuffling her children away, and not saying goodbye. Dovewing comes back to see Ivypool a moon later, and Ivypool hesitates speaking to her before eventually giving in, headbutting her, and telling her she understands. The next series is about Ivypool and Dovewing's children, but Ivypool takes a back seat and is less involved in her daughter's life than she was in Twigpaw's. In fact, she only shows up a handful of times in general in the last 2 books. She takes on a quote-unquote supportive mother role in the place of No Stars when she hadn't really done so before. She's devastated at the end of the 6th book, as Bristlefrost and her corpse have disappeared forever. But something, let's say interesting about Ivypool and the Broken Code is that she is not really shown in any level of political position. She doesn't really support or not support Squirrelflight and Darkness Within. In fact, her name is only mentioned once in the whole book. She only has one relevant mention on the subject in the place of No Stars, where she says, "I believe Squirrelflight must have helped Ashfur escape," she declared. "But she would have only done it to keep Bramblestar's body safe, so that he can return to it. And it's not just because he's her mate. Doesn't every cat want our leader back?" So she supports her in the issue of, the release of Bramblestar's corpse to prevent its murder, at the very least. She's barely mentioned in the most recent arc, though. She shows up slightly less than Poppy Frost, even, from what I can tell. Her most relevant scene is one where she isn't on screen, where Dovewing comes to visit her. Squirrelflight mentions Ivypool is probably anxious to see Dovewing, but this anxiety is met with Dovewing's excitement, not worry or urgency, and Nightheart is left alone there, and we don't see the sisters meeting, seemingly back on good terms. So then, if she really barely shows up in the last 2 arcs, why Ivypool? Well, she's a protagonist, which isn't enough to fuel Twig Branch this far, but most of the reason Ivypool would be chosen at this point is leaning on fandom perception. They know the fandom wants Ivypool, they know the fandom expects Ivypool. The plush dolls, again, are a good example of this. She came in 4th during the 2nd poll, and 3rd during the 3rd poll, eventually being made into a plush and a mini. Additionally, the recent Super Edition poll, which, when the botted votes were removed, showed her nearly tied with the winner, River Star, while Misty Star was getting just about nothing in comparison. Now, I have no doubt in my mind that there was some sort of plan in mind for a book about all 3 of these cats, seeing as we got both the winner and the runner-up from the last poll as well. Choosing Ivypool would be a good decision on the parts of the authors simply for Ivy's popularity. That said, would she make a good deputy? Well, let's consider the current conflict. Everyone is really afraid that if Squilf becomes leader, she's going to attack ShadowClan and force them to stop having control over RiverClan. Now, Ivypool has probably made up with Dovewing, but that doesn't mean she hasn't always hated Tigerheart. She seems like she has a serious problem with clan switching, even though she's been privately opposed as opposed to politically voicing it in the most recent arc. Even as recently in The Place of No Stars, when her daughter suggests she loves Rootspring, she responds, Ivypool gave her a hard look, and when she spoke, her voice had an edge as sharp as fangs. I went through all that with my sister, she meowed. And you're telling me you want to mate with a cat from another clan? Ivypool later connects with Rootspring over their shared loss, but she's not a cat who ever voices her support over the new code changes. Again, I think Ivypool could be a good deputy in that she would organize patrols well, do a deputy's duties well, but she's unquestionably got some heavy negative feelings about her sisters leaving her, and very possibly, if we're being logical, is carrying biases against clan switching and also Tigerstar, like Tigerstar as a person specifically. I believe that if Squirrelflight is made leader, from what we understand of her, she might still go after ShadowClan for occupying RiverClan in the same way that the main characters are worried about. But if she's to make someone like Ivypool her deputy, Ivypool has personal negative investment in the current politics of the clans. And that said, Lionblaze has a lot of the same baggage. Lionblaze wanted to punish and kill Shadowsight. It probably wouldn't even be advisable to take Lionblaze into battle against ShadowClan, let alone make him deputy. So, deputy quality for Ivypool. Probably good, but a problem with ShadowClan, specifically. So this leads into my final option, Sparkpelt. For some reason, as of writing this, I haven't seen anyone talk about Sparkpelt as a serious option, which is a bit odd to me. I've got a few reasons to suspect her, but I'll go over everything first. I have a lot to go over, however, and I'll try to be brief, but I know I won't be. I'll try to talk about only the possibly relevant points of her character. The thing is that Sparkpelt is a character created by the new team, so they have used her quite a bit more than these other 2. Sparkpelt is the sister to the protagonist in A Vision of Shadows. She's shown to be more physically capable than her brother, learning how to hunt and fight easily while he struggles in comparison. The narrative treats her as a prodigy, and Greystripe notes that she looks more like Firestar than any cat he ever saw. She's close with her brother Alderpaw, unlike a lot of more recent side sister characters, and Alderpaw is absolutely devastated by the idea of being separated from her in the way that Twigkit and Violetkit were. That said, A Vision of Shadows goes on, and Sparkpelt takes a bit of a back seat. She's opinionated and hyperbolic. She shouts when something she doesn't like is announced at a gathering, and she says things like, "Everybody knows he's been crazy as a cuckoo since he lost that life," about One Star. She openly questions the validity of ShadowClan as a clan once Tigerstar only has 2 cats under him, and cat punches Berrynose when he insults Alderpaw and Twigkit. She shows excitement, offering to be on patrol and go find ShadowClan, and seems to be proud of her initial journey with Alderpaw 2 books earlier during Shattered Sky. She remains a supportive figure to her brother throughout, despite their political differences. That said, during Darkest Night, she she begins to be annoyed with all the non-ThunderClan cats in ThunderClan. This leads into her having anxiety about where SkyClan is going to live when all the ground along the lake is spoken for. Her attitude is questioned by Twigpaw, who thinks, why was Sparkpelt being so crabby? She was usually so positive about everything. Sparkpelt's negativity about SkyClan is something that makes Alderheart anxious as well. When he confronts her about it, she insists that SkyClan should go back to their home. She's worried about SkyClan after what happened with Darktail and his rogues moving in. She gets upset with him, asking who's going to give up the territory for them, and storms off. She stands up at a gathering to bring this in front of everyone, asking why SkyClan can't return to the Gorge now that it's safe from rogues. This doesn't go very far because very soon after, Tigerstar announces ShadowClan is willing to give up territory for them. Despite this, after this point she seems to stop caring so much about SkyClan and instead cares about a new thing, Lark Song. Alderheart hates this, as he's still mad at her about the SkyClan thing. When Alderheart goes into Two-Leg Place to try and find a prophesized six-toed cat, she follows him and saves him from an attacker. They make up afterward, although Sparkpelt hasn't changed her opinion on SkyClan. Then she gets attacked by a dog, which is normal Sparkpelt stuff. Sparkpelt is hostile with Twigpaw when she wants to switch back to being a ThunderClan apprentice. Seemingly because of this, Bramblestar reassigns Twigpaw for her to train. She's a harsh mentor, and she's bad-mannered towards Twigbranch. She doesn't resemble the cat that she was in the first half of A Vision of Shadows nearly at all. Twigpaw eventually needs to talk to Bramblestar to get her to stop training her at a lower level than she needs, as a cat who's already been an apprentice twice as long as most cats are. Seemingly, Sparkpelt starts taking her training more seriously after this and a bout of sickness and decides to assess her not long after. She stops being insulting and instead becomes praising of Twigbranch's ability. Later, she accuses Dovewing of being a traitor when she goes to ShadowClan. In the last book of A Vision of Shadows, her stance on SkyClan seemingly hasn't changed. Her relationships with Twigbranch and Alderheart are back to being healthy, but her stance on SkyClan leaving and trying to leave is still, they should. I miss the status quo. That said, Sparkpelt is much less prominent in those last few A Vision of Shadows books, where she mostly just exists to scare Alderheart with her wild ideas about where SkyClan can go. But in Squirrelflight's Hope, she's suddenly a very central character, same with the most recent arc, so I'm going to keep it to only things that are relevant to the deputyship position. When Squirrelflight goes to check the land above the ThunderClan border, Sparkpelt catches her. Squirrelflight tells her to keep it a secret, and she's doing this without Bramblestar's permission. She eventually tells Bramblestar out of worry and feeling torn between her parents. Soon after, she tells them that she's having kids. She doesn't say anything negative about SkyClan in this novel, or really the ever-present outsiders, the sisters. That said, she doesn't have any chances to between worrying about her pregnancy and being unfathomably depressed. But in the beginning, despite the fact that she caught her mother with the SkyClan leader, she doesn't have anything bad to say about SkyClan. She just worries about her mother, which is very, very different than her attitude would have been in a late Vision of Shadows. In Lost Stars, she encourages her mother to go get her 9 lives when it seems that Bramblestar is dead. Nothing much else. In the second book, The Silent Thaw, she becomes a target of the imposter. Bristlefrost accidentally lets it slip that she had gone off alone, and it's eventually revealed that she was looking for the exiled Lionblaze. Okay, accidentally might be a strong word for what Bristlefrost does, but whatever. She begs Bramblestar not to banish her as well so that she can stay with her kids. As punishment, the imposter sends her off alone to gather catmint from the abandoned two-leg nest, where she is mauled by dogs he planted there. As ThunderClan loses more and more cats, including both medicine cats, Sparkpelt begs imposter Bramblestar to do something about getting Flipclaw trained, as his incompetence is causing problems, still thinking that being his daughter might sway his opinion. He exiles her for this, and eventually it's not just her leaving ThunderClan, but Greystripe also gets exiled, and then his kits Blossomfall and Bumblestripe follow him, and then Cinderheart and Sparkpelt's daughter Finchpaw also choose to leave with them. Something I think I forgot to mention is that Ivypool is shown to want to leave here, but she stops when she realizes she would be leaving her kids behind. Sparkpelt, however, has no choice. Sparkpelt is insistent of Squirrelflight's loyalty throughout the Place of No Stars. She's desperate to do anything she can to save Squirrelflight, but then she doesn't show up in the last book of the arc. Oh well, now we get to the most recent arc, which has, of this video, 3 books. Sparkpelt is the mother of the protagonist here, so she's more prominent than she has been in a while. When Squirrelflight needs cats she trusts to take on a patrol to solve a WindClan prey stealing problem behind Bramblestar's back, she chooses to take Sparkpelt with her. Squirrelflight also mentions that Sparkpelt has always been of good judgment when trying to get her to give her son extra training. This doesn't end up happening, however. After Flamepaw's name is changed to Nightheart, Sparkpelt reacts negatively and finds him to have betrayed her. Aside from this, we don't see much of her in the second book at all. She just kind of continues being passive-aggressive towards him for this and for leaving ThunderClan until the end of the third book, where she apologizes for her harshness and makes up with her son. I think Sparkpelt is definitely in the same league as Ivypool and Lionblaze. There's one hang-up in it really, and that's just the nepotism. Squirrelflight making her daughter the deputy would be very in character and would make narrative sense, like how she trusts her specifically over others when she's going on a mission without Bramblestar's understanding. That said, the fandom and the characters in the books have been consistent about calling out ThunderClan's nepotism lately. Recently, more so than the last two cats, not really counting the fact that she made Lionblaze deputy because of how that went, Sparkpelt seems to be the cat that Squirrelflight trusts the most. Another thing to notice about Sparkpelt is that she's on the cover of the next book, although alongside Finchlight, seemingly work together with Sunbeam to some goal. That said, the book is called Thunder. 2 out of the 3 protagonists are in ThunderClan, and the blurb says nothing about ThunderClan, so we can't glean any real information from it except for the fact, hey, look, it's Sparkpelt, she's on the cover of this book. When it comes to things like Sparkpelt's view on SkyClan or Outsiders, it seems largely dropped. She had a lot of problems with her son leaving ThunderClan, but none of them were rooted in prior xenophobia. It was all personal, internal hurt over her family and legacy. Her feelings when it comes to Nightheart are of the content we know resolved. She has no reason to be irrationally angry about the code changes or clan switching, and while that's still capable of changing as Sparkpelt hasn't yet learned of Sunbeam's arrival, I doubt she's going to react like Berryheart after just making up with her son. So, Sparkpelt's deputy quality. I think she'd be good at it, in the same way she'd be good at hunting or fighting or whatever. I think she'd be at least less rash and aggressive than Lionblaze and Ivypool, especially seeing as we have a scene where Flamepaw deduces very clearly that Sparkpelt is the more diplomatic choice over Lionblaze specifically. Largely, though, I think she would just be Squirrelflight too. While likely a little bit more conservative with her views than Squilf, I can't imagine her being anything but entirely loyal to her in a way that's almost boring. That said, both of the other main options are more extreme choices in terms of aggression. Both Ivypool and Sparkpelt have a streak somewhere about being against this code change for one reason or another, but they're different. Ivypool's a bit more irrational, involving not only a distaste for clan switching, but also a distaste for the individual boyfriend her sister has, but gets over it more easily. But she still holds a grudge in her heart about it, briefly panicking about Briss's intention to be in love with Rootspring. But Sparkpelt's is intensely personal and likely compounded by Nightheart's name change on top of his leaving, harming her pride as opposed to any sort of right or wrong within the code. But both of these cats, in the minds of the authors, have made up with their respective relatives. That said, the most likely of these to happen, I believe, is Ivypool. Lionblaze is all but disqualified. Sparkpelt would feel like she was the right choice, but the fandom clamoring for Ivypool to be the deputy is basically deafening, on top of the fact that, unlike the other two, Ivypool isn't Squirrelflight's child. Is she what I want? No, I want Poppy Frost. You hear me, Aarons? Poppy Frost. But Ivypool is probably what's happening. I think a lot of cats would make for a more interesting development, but they're largely background characters. The team isn't going to have them on their minds. I would like for someone from the Brackenfur line to be chosen, like Lilyheart, Poppy Frost, and Molewhisker, but I simply doubt it. Now, I understand this video is already a length unparalleled. I get that. But if it's already this long, I mean, I might as well have an honorable mentions category. These cats cannot become deputy because they haven't had an apprentice or they're elders, but let's talk about a few of them real quick. Thornclaw. Thornclaw was around and a non-retired warrior for all of the Broken Code, even though his siblings had retired moons beforehand. He was very upset with Squirrelflight's choice of temporary deputy in Lionblaze, and to some extent, at one point, actually was sort of in Squirrelflight's friend group. When she was not getting along with Brambleclaw and she was hanging out with a bunch of losers, that is. She would never pick him as deputy, as he was an active enemy while she was leader last time. He would be the worst. Sure, the guy had 4 apprentices, but he would be the more aggressive version of the Blossomfall idea from earlier. It would be a terrible mistake and a ploy to get the more conservative warriors respect, and he'd probably go out fighting. I'm sure he'd be fine at organizing patrols, though. Secondarily, Brightheart. Brightheart, in contrast to Thornclaw, would be fantastic. She would be level-headed when dealing with threats. She would be responsible and wise and all sorts of other adult words. But not only is she an elder, she's going to die apprentice-free despite being so. She was promised an apprentice after J-Paw backed out of his training, but she never received one. And we could argue that the couple weeks she spent with J-Paw is enough to qualify her for the position, but she's also just very retired, more so than her brother ever was. But she could be like the advanced version of the quote-unquote White Storm choice. She's an elderly warrior with a lot of experience, and she's very wise and very capable, so as deputy, she would be very interesting and probably die. Sorry, she would though. And lastly, for my honorable mentions, Spotfur. Spotfur has not only never had an apprentice, but she's also currently a nursery queen. She's completely disqualified from every angle, and even if her kids are old enough to be apprenticed, no one's ever going to apprentice their kid to their mom. Unfortunately, she's one of the most compelling characters ThunderClan has. If she was qualified, I would be going for her stronger than any of these other options. She's got a think outside of the box attitude and a strong sense of justice and what's fair or unfair. She's cunning and responsible for the actions that eventually lead to the imposter's initial loss of power in ThunderClan. She has already more than proven herself capable of organizing others. I hope that going forward, there's some opportunity for her to eventually take the position of deputy for herself down the line, even if some other character has it first. She just, above all the other cats, seems made for the role, and it's kind of a disappointment that she isn't qualified for it. Not that having someone strong and capable in that position is what's best for our storytelling. In fact, I think that it would be best for the books if the person in the deputy position wasn't particularly capable, or at least was someone who contrasts very highly with Squirrelflight. And as it stands, Spotfur is very, very alike Squirrelflight in personality, and that's kind of part of what's so attractive about her as a character, is the idea that she's kind of another Squirrelflight. And just when you think I'm done, I've got one more category, and it's called Worst Possible Choice. Flipclaw. Flipclaw is showcased repeatedly in this arc to be a goofy, silly, impulsive type of guy who seems to learn nothing and think about nothing. He is made into a medicine cat that seemingly actively harms instead of healing. He goes on a wander, seemingly for the sole purpose that he wants to date his aunt, and gets immediately turned down. Instead, he goes to the mountains to flirt with Feather of Flying Hawk, breaks his leg, wanders back, fails for a while at trying to convince Flywhisker and Snaptooth to stop being kitty pets before coming home and being like, "Hi guys," slight smile. Later on, him and his sister are one of the few cats we see actively actually bullying Nightheart for changing his name as opposed to just being upset. He's a silly, weird little loser of a guy. He's Nuka from The Lion King 2. He's Flipclaw. He shouldn't be deputy. He would be really bad at it and say things like, "Hey, Squirrel Star, we should start wearing fedoras so the other clans think we're cooler." And that's why Flipclaw should be the deputy. So, in conclusion, if Squirrelflight lives to be and is allowed to be leader, cross your fingers, I think we're probably looking at Ivypool. Is she the best choice? No, not really. I'm almost sure it's the choice we're going with, though. And in the end, no matter what I say here, they're probably going to write Ivypool as an individual who isn't being affected by her grudges and immaturity, but instead as someone who's written as calm and level-headed, wizened from moons as a dark forest trainee and the loss of her daughter. I'm almost positive. Will this be changing her personality for a new purpose? Maybe a little, but it wouldn't exactly be the first time they've done something like this either. Now, as far as best choice goes, best possible choice, in my opinion, that might actually just be Lilyheart. While I feel like Molewhisker is the most capable and quite possibly the most interesting, my feelings of not wanting another Tom immediately and completely overwhelm that. Lilyheart has been recently relevant and has always been a supporter of Squirrelflight. But that said, I do worry she wouldn't be as fun as some of the other options, and her connections to other people are simply motherly, and other than being nice and kind, she has very little about her that stands out, so I doubt she's actually in the running. But in the end, anything could happen, and any one of these cats could be elected, killed off, and replaced by another one of these cats at any given point. If Ivypool becomes deputy, as it seems she probably will end up being deputy, I can imagine that we're going to see an Ivypool Super Edition next summer. Oh no, this video's an hour long. Anyway, I will see you guys next week. Thank you very much for watching all of this. Oh my goodness.